Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking something you probably consider just a mild annoyance, a trivial nothing, really, and we are going to completely reframe it. We're talking about boredom. But not just as a temporary lack of entertainment. We're looking at boredom as a profound historical force that has shaped human evolution, our culture, and honestly, sometimes our very darkest impulses.
Okay, let's just dive right into this by hitting you with a pretty intense claim. The renowned philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once boldly stated, "Boredom is the root of all evil." Now, that feels like a massive exaggeration at first glance, right? I mean, we naturally assume boredom is just a mild psychic disturbance, maybe a bit of a yawn on a rainy Sunday afternoon. But what if Kierkegaard actually hit the nail on the head? What if this feeling is much, much deeper than a simple desire to be entertained?
Let's jump into section 1, the illusion of triviality, and rethink this so-called minor affect. For a really long time, society, and honestly even academia, collectively dismissed boredom as this whimsical, unimportant state of mind, a minor affect compared to weighty things like anger or joy. But check out this staggering prediction from 1964. The legendary science fiction writer Isaac Asimov prophetically warned that by the year 2014, humanity would be afflicted by a disease of boredom that would have serious sociological consequences. He wasn't joking around. He literally saw that as society modernized and our basic needs were easily met, the sheer weight of empty time would become this massive, agonizing burden for us.
And we've actually come incredibly far in taking Asimov's warning seriously. I mean, there's literally an International Society of Boredom Studies. This is not a punchline. It's an entire academic discipline. Scholars are dedicating their entire lives to studying this supposedly trivial feeling because, as the literature proves, its impact on our modern society is absolutely monumental.
Let's anchor this abstract emotion in some hard data. A massive experience sampling study tracking thousands of people in the US found that a whopping 63% of people reported feeling bored over just a short period. It was the 7th most frequently reported emotion out of a massive list. Boredom is everywhere. It cuts across gender, age, social class. It is an inescapable, deeply ingrained fact of the human condition.
But here's the real kicker, the actual economic and daily reality of all that boredom. Research indicates that almost 1/3 of employees waste 2 hours every single day at work simply because they're bored. Sociologists actually call this empty labor. It's not just a minor irritation for management, it is costing the global economy billions, driving us to secretly scroll through the internet while we, pretend to be hard at work.
Moving on to section 2, the demands of the mind and the dangers of the void.
All right, we need to completely shatter any lingering preconceived notions you might have about boredom being completely harmless. I want to ask you a question directly. What would you do to escape your own mind? If I put you in a room with absolutely zero stimulation, no phone, no books, no windows, how far would you go to escape that restless, unpredictable energy of having absolutely nothing to do?
Well, the answer to that question might actually terrify you. In a series of totally shocking psychological experiments, researchers put people in exactly that boring environment for just a few minutes. The only thing in the room was a button they could press to voluntarily give themselves an electric shock. And guess what? People literally chose physical pain over a bored mind. The sheer unpleasantness of boredom is so highly motivational that people preferred to shock themselves rather than just sit there with their own thoughts. Crazy, right?
And this drive to escape scales up dramatically in the real world. When we are desperate to escape the void, boredom becomes a wildly destructive catalyst. It motivated the invention of Russian roulette by soldiers who were just trapped in the monotonous inactivity of military trenches. Biographers point to the profound boredom of endless touring as a key driver in the tragic drug addictions of icons like Elvis Presley and Janis Joplin. It's even cited by criminologists as a primary motivation for vandalism, extreme risk-taking like reckless driving, and premeditated thrill killing, which are horrific crimes committed not for money or revenge, but literally just for the sheer excitement to break the tedium. Consider two totally different professional experiences of boredom here. You've got the monotonous isolation of long-haul truck drivers on one hand, and then the high-stakes waiting of astronauts, soldiers, and airplane pilots on the other. Researchers have perfectly described these jobs as endless hours of tedious boredom, punctuated by moments of stark terror. Whether it's a dull highway or the vacuum of space, this prolonged understimulation degrades our attention, spikes our stress hormones, and poses a literal threat to human life.
Which brings us to section 3, an evolutionary alarm clock and its biological purpose. So if boredom is this dangerous, this destructive, and this incredibly unpleasant, why on earth do we even feel it? Well, boredom isn't a passive state. It's an active agent. It is literally an internal alarm clock. It's a psychological mechanism shaped by natural selection, signaling to your brain that whatever you are doing right now is no longer beneficial or meaningful. Just like physical pain tells you to pull your hand off a hot stove to prevent tissue damage, boredom tells you to pull your attention away from a useless situation to prevent you from wasting time. This internal alarm clock actually helped our animal ancestors survive in a few absolutely crucial ways. First off, it conserves vital energy. If an activity isn't yielding results, boredom forces you to stop wasting calories on it. Second, it promotes learning and exploration. It pushes animals to find new food sources or play with new materials, making them highly adaptable to environmental changes. It also deepens our perception, forcing us to quickly scan our surroundings for something new. And fascinatingly, it even acts as a social defense mechanism, sort of like a mild form of disgust, protecting us from confined, predictably stagnant social situations. It basically kept our ancestors on their toes. Finally, let's look at Section 4, the catalyst for culture, and why it's a creative necessity.
So how does this build from a mere animal survival mechanism into the very foundation of human culture and art? Well, it all comes down to this incredible psychological concept, counterfactual imagination. This is our ability to mentally simulate alternatives to reality, to imagine how the world could be totally different. This is often activated in the brain's default mode network. But here's the catch. The default mode network only really fires up when we disconnect from overstimulating environments. In other words, boredom is an absolute necessity for our brains to wander, to connect disparate ideas, and to generate serendipitous, creative breakthroughs.
And that is exactly why boredom has famously been called the mother of the muses. History's greatest minds relied on profound emptiness to drive cultural advancement. Writers like Goethe, the Dadaist avant-garde artists, and philosophers throughout history have harnessed that disagreeable lull of the soul. Without the agonizing frustration of boredom, we simply wouldn't have the motivation to invent, to write, to paint, or to advance human civilization. We just sit comfortably doing the exact same repetitive things forever. Which brings us to a final question I want to leave you with today. When your internal alarm rings next, when that restless, uncomfortable feeling of having absolutely nothing to do creeps in, are you just going to reach for a screen to numb it, or will you use it to invent something new? Let that sink in for a bit. Question your habits and see if you can harness the power of your own boredom. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.